gonna show you guys my sugar cookie recipe. So basically I just have my 6 ounces of butter, which is 1.5 sticks. And this has been sitting out for about 30 minutes, so it's still cool to the touch, but when you touch it, it definitely still indents. You definitely don't want it to be melted. Try to resist the urge to pop this in the microwave. I know it's hard to be patient, but when it's melted, it can cause your cookies to spread. So it's best to have just kind of cool butter. So just let it sit on your counter for about 20 or 30 minutes. Same with the eggs, and this is cream cheese. And then we're gonna use pure vanilla extract, and then this is just an optional addition. I like pure vanilla bean paste. You could substitute that for almond extract, you could do orange, you could do really any flavor that you want. So you can definitely make this your own. And I don't think I mentioned, but this is 2 ounces of cream cheese here. So we're gonna go ahead and beat the butter and the sugar first in the mixer. So I've cracked 2 eggs in a bowl, and now I'm going to add the vanilla. So I'm gonna do a tablespoon of vanilla extract. And then this is optional, but I love the look of pure vanilla bean paste here. It has the tiny little vanilla beans. So you get the same flavor that you would with a vanilla bean, but you don't have to do all the work of scraping it out and cutting it. And so it's kind of just a shortcut. And this is almost vanilla bean in its purest form. So the purest form would be the bean, and then this is the second best. But I really do like the flavor that you get from the extract, so you could try doing the entire recipe with this, but I actually like vanilla bean extract. I think it gives it a really nice flavor. So you can kind of do a combination of vanillas. I know it's also really popular to do like Mexican vanilla. So just play around with flavor and see kind of what you guys like best. So once you've got your eggs and your flavorings all together, I just like to give this a quick stir, get these ingredients all incorporated together. You could definitely whisk this if you rather, but I find a fork works just fine. And I did want to say one quick thing. Not all vanilla bean pastes are made equal. This is a really good brand. So if you've tried a different brand and you don't love it, give this one a try. I know it's expensive, but it's definitely worth it, but it's definitely not necessary. Majority of the flavor comes from pure vanilla extract, so you are going to be saving some money by not using this, because this is definitely a splurge, but I just think it's fun to see the tiny little black specks in your cookies that show that it's made with true vanilla bean. Now it's time to add the flour. If you are just baking as a hobby, it's not as necessary to weigh out your ingredients, but I find this is just the best way to have a really consistent recipe. And so I invested in a kitchen scale. They're not very expensive. I just got mine from Amazon, and it has this really cool feature where it will subtract the weight of your bowl. So I'm gonna see if you can, I'm gonna move it around so you can maybe see the numbers there. So I'm just gonna hit this tare right here, and it's gonna bring it down to 0. So now I know that the only thing that this scale is measuring is the ingredients that I add into this bowl. So we're gonna do our flour, and we need 18.4 ounces of flour. So that's close enough. So now you would add in your baking powder. We're gonna do 1/2 teaspoon. Let's give that a good sprinkle. You'd also add in 1/2 teaspoon of salt here. I'm actually using salted butter, and I'll include the brand in my recipe. It's just from Sam, so it's Maker's Mark, and I find that it doesn't change the taste of my recipe, but all brands of butter have different amounts of salt. So if you want to use unsalted butter, you can definitely control the amount of salt you add. So that's completely up to you. I just think it's just a way to cut down on a step and save on not having to make sure I always have salt on hand, so I just kind of skip that step and use salted butter, but that's definitely something that you can decide what you want to do. So I have the KitchenAid Professional 600, which is a 6-quart mixer, and normally I am doubling this recipe, and so I really love having the larger size, but you definitely don't need this big of a mixer. You can definitely do one that is a little smaller. Just kind of depends on how much you're going to be making at once. So we're going to add our butter, and now we're going to add in 2 cups of sugar. And I just use the paddle here. We're just going to mix this until it's combined. Make sure you add in your cream cheese. I totally forgot. And so normally I add this in with my butter and sugar at the beginning, but I'm just gonna go ahead and add it in now and let that get all mixed in together. So obviously try not to forget like me, but it's not the end of the world if you do. Okay, so now that you have your butter, your cream cheese, and your sugar all creamed together, I kind of just like to scrape the sides down. And you can see it's a pretty nice fluffy consistency there. So I try to mix my dough for the least amount of time as possible. So really just until the ingredients come together. The more that you mix this, the tougher your cookies can be. So you definitely don't want to overmix your ingredients. So try to keep an eye on it. Okay, so now I'm gonna add in our egg mixture, which was 2 eggs, 1 tablespoon of vanilla extract, and 1 teaspoon of vanilla bean paste. And I'm gonna go ahead and scrape the bowl because I wanna make sure that we get all of those flavorful seeds in there. All right, and now I'm just gonna mix this until combined. So I mix this till it's nice and combined, and you can see that there's still some lumps in it, so it's not perfectly smooth, but that's a pretty good consistency right there. So now it's time to add in our flour and our baking powder, and if you are adding in the salt, then it would also be in this dry ingredient mixture. And I just like to add in a cup at a time so that it doesn't all blow up in your face. So once the ingredients start to kind of ball in the center, it's not going to be a complete clean pull away from the side of the bowl, and that's okay. But the main thing is you want to check that the the dough is not sticking to your fingers. So you see how that's coming off clean. So I know that this dough is ready because it's not sticking to my fingers. So it's still sticking to the sides of the bowl. Some recipes will say it's ready whenever it pulls away completely. This is not one of those recipes. It's a little bit more sticky. But if you were to touch this, and let me see if I can find a spot that's not mixed in. Nope, all of this is pretty good. But if you were to find a spot where it was sticking to your fingers, just add just a tiny bit more flour, say maybe like just you know, maybe the bottom of a measuring cup, maybe just like a couple ounces or so. A lot of this can depend on humidity. It can depend on how warm your butter is. So what works for me may not be the exact measurement for you, and that's okay. So the more you make it, the more familiar you'll get with it, but you basically just want your finger to come away clean whenever you touch the dough. So now that the dough is all mixed together, the next step is to roll this into grapefruit sized balls, and then we're going to roll that out. I roll mine out 5/16 of an inch. You can do this 3/8 of an inch, which would be a thicker cookie, or you could do 1/4 of an inch, which is a little bit thinner. So 5/16 is an in-between. It's not as thin as 1/4, it's not quite as thick as 3/8. So that's just a personal preference, but you guys can definitely play around with that and see what size you prefer. It's totally up to you. If you do decide to do a thicker cookie, it would just need to bake a little bit longer. And if you do a thinner cookie, you could probably pull that out, I'd say within 7 minutes, whereas this might take closer to 8 minutes, and the thicker cookie may be more like 9 to 10. Totally depends on your oven. So that's definitely something to kind of keep an eye on. So once we have this rolled out, we're just going to pop that in the freezer, let it get nice and cold. And then whenever you cut out your shapes, it just makes it so much easier because the dough really holds its shape and you're not having to worry about the shapes that you're cutting out getting kind of misfigured. So I like to make sure it's nice and cold when I cut my shapes out, and then I pop it back in the freezer and freeze it for, I'd say, another 20 to 30 minutes to make sure that the dough is really nice and cold before I pop it in the oven. And that's just a trick that I found helps keep the cookie dough from spreading.